coming in. All right, well, look, welcome everybody. This is session 2 of our Orkestra Masterclass series. So today we're going to be talking about matching solutions to customer needs. My name's Tyler Jackman. I'm head of sales here at Orkestra. And joining me today, we've got our co-CEO and co-founder, James Allston, who's going to be running through the majority of the session. So for any of you that missed last week's session, there was a great session with Chris and James, who discussed deeply understanding customers' needs. If you weren't here for that, and this is your first session, we do have recordings of that. So you would have got sent that in emails and you can access it through, just reach out to one of us and we can send you a link to that. But what is our Masterclass series all about? So it's a 4-part series, and we really want to talk about how we can really empower your sales and how we can ramp up the way that you can sell commercial solar and battery systems. And we've really broken this down into 4 parts. So session 1 was deeply understanding your customer's needs. Today, we're going to talk about matching energy solutions or matching solutions to those customer needs. And then next week, we're going to be talking about communicating the value of C&I to C&I customers. So how do we talk to those decision makers in a language that they understand, and that can really get your proposals across the line. And then in our 4th session, we're going to be talking about pumping up those projects. So today, the objective is we're going to be talking about our feasibility first method. So how do we sell and what method do we use to sell in the best way possible? The playbooks we've got, James has done a great job building some playbooks for matching solutions to customer needs. And then lastly, we're going to spend a bit of time in the Orkestra platform, designing in a way that you can sell in a feasibility first method. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just recapping last week's session and going through that and what we've already touched on. And then we're going to go through, and I'm going to hand over to James, who's going to go through our feasibility first design method, and then launch into a demo. So about half an hour we're going to spend on a demo, and then don't think you're getting away with this free. It's going to be a bit of homework for all of you to complete before our next session, but it will be very, very beneficial for you to do so. And then at the last end part, we've got about 10 minutes for Q&A. So please put your questions in the Q&A. So housekeeping in the chat and questions in the Q&A. And at the end of the session, we'll go through those together and hopefully have some answers for you. So please do that. And then at the very end, we also will have a survey. We love to hear your feedback. We want to hear, we want to improve these webinar series as much as possible. So any feedback is great for us to hear. And overall, it's about 60 minutes. So just a bit of a recap on last week. So we talk about the difference of selling methods and what we're sort of seeing. We talk to many different solar installers out there, and the difference between your typical solar sales process versus what we call a consultative sales process. And the main things that we really come up against is what is very common out in the industry is that it's very much seems to be a cookie cutter approach with a customer coming to you and saying, I want 40 kilowatts, I want 100 kilowatts. And without any further questioning, you go and design that system and put it in front of them. And what we're seeing is what happens when we're using that method is we don't actually understand what the problem is. And generally you're up against all your competitors who are doing the same size quotes of 100 kilowatts. And then it comes down to a conversation, which is what panels are you using? Why is this the best inverter? And these are very marginal differences, and it's a race to the bottom on price. As we look at consultative selling, we're doing a lot more listening. We want to understand the customer's problems because there's probably multiple solutions that could meet their needs, and potentially we're missing some value with the first approach. So in here, we really want to listen and understand before we go into solution mode, which is what we're going to discuss today. So when we talk about feasibility first method, after talking to a lot of companies about how they're selling and what their sales process looks like, on the top there, we're looking at a traditional sales method. So a lot of the time a lead comes in, a little bit of qualification happens, whether it's an electricity bill, trying to get some meter data, trying to get a bit more information out of them. Maybe a sales rep goes and does a site visit in this early stage, maybe not. But it's going straight into technical design. So going into a platform, designing potentially one solution, a feasibility report from that design, and then into a sales proposal, which they're putting in front of a customer without understanding any more about what that customer wants or needs. And what's happening is it's getting spit back into the technical design stage pretty quickly. And this might go around in circles. It might go, 2 days back into design stage and then works its way through. And this can take days to weeks. And the conversion rate of this is we're still seeing quite a lot of drop off. What we're really focused on today is feasibility first method, which pulls in that feasibility analysis right to the beginning. It allows you to work through a range of different solutions. And then if the customer's telling you things like, oh, look, I don't know what my budget is yet, or I'm not sure what my minimum return of investment has to be. So we can work through that with them very, very quickly with 1 or 2 extra clicks to go back to another solution. And you can refine these drivers with the customer in this feasibility first approach. And then what that does is it allows 2 things. One, it allows you to get no's from customers earlier. So they're not going to be your customer. You can find out that without having to do a bunch of technical design. But for the ones that are happy with the results from it, then you can spend your time and your engineering team going through that technical process to a final contract. Next slide, James. So what we're looking at, a part of this process is really understanding the who. So who is the customer? Why is the customer considering the solar or battery solutions or any other energy solutions? And how can we solve that problem for them? So today I'm going to hand over to James now, who's going to talk about the what is the solution for these customers. So over to you, James.
Thanks, mate. And also the how we get there. So,
sorry, left out the how.
Thanks very much, Tyler. Great summary of last week's session. If you missed it, please go back and have a watch. It was really fantastic. We got lots of really good feedback on the discovery session that Chris ran as the second part of that session. So we're going to move now from thinking about the discovery and understanding customers' problems to working through to like how do you design a solution. So that's really the focus of today's session, is trying to get to that point and do that in a really efficient way. And I'm going to start off by talking to this design method. So we talked about that feasibility first method before, and Tyler went through that slide. I want to sort of go a layer deeper on that slide and sort of talk to the process that needs to be followed to kind of identify a winning solution for a customer. And this is called the double design method. It's actually a method that we use in at Orkestra for our product development. So when people are sending us a feature idea, they might like give us the idea, and then we start going through this process of discovery, understanding why does the customer want that feature, what's the problem that they're trying to solve for, and then we actually move into a design process where our product and design teams start thinking through different ways that we might be able to solve that particular problem. And typically what we'll find is that we come up with a very different and sometimes much more elegant answer to the solution than what the customer might have originally proposed as a feature idea. So if we apply this same approach to the selling of energy solutions, what we're going to start off with is what we discussed last week, which is the discovery process, where we're going to go and try and really explore the problem and ask why is the customer exploring solar, like what's driving this, and this is a process of divergence, right? What we're doing is we're actually trying to blow open the problem, try and really explore it and understand what's going on. And then we're going to go through a process of convergence, where we're converging in on like what is the problem that by solving them we're going to have the highest impact at that particular customer. So we're deciding what to fix. And then we're going to go through a second stage, which is the design process, where we're going to test a lot of different solutions. So within Orkestra, you can test, hundreds of different potential solutions to that problem. And then we're going to go through, again, another process of convergence where we're going to converge in on like, what is the optimum solution to that particular customer problem? And in theory, if we follow through this process, we're going to get to a winning sales proposal. And if we do this in a way that we really empathize with the customer and we're really deeply understanding their problem when we're building that trust, that when we get to that winning sales proposal, like we're likely to have a very, very high chance of success of closing that proposal at the end. So the typical problems that we're going to come across, and like most of them are going to boil down to probably one of these 5 different problems. There's going to be variations on a theme, of course, and little niche problems that people are out there solving with new energy solutions. But the most common things that we're going to run up against are things like my power bills are too high, my energy costs are unpredictable and volatile. I want to reduce my carbon footprint or improve my sustainability, or something around CSR, and then someone might also just see solar and batteries as a good investment and wants to understand like what's the returns on that. Or finally, like my grid is unreliable and I'm wanting to improve the reliability of my electricity supply on site. So a lot of the solutions that you're going to be solving for are going to be variations on a theme of one of these particular problems, or combinations of these problems that you're solving for. And what we're aiming to help you with is like work to like how you find a solution to one of these particular problems. The other thing to think about is like, what's the solution to each one of these problems? So a customer might come to you and say, I want 100 kilowatts of solar. But when you start to unpick that problem and trying to understand what they're actually trying to solve for, there might be a whole range of different technology solutions that'll actually solve for that problem. So for example, if the customer's reason for getting solar is my power bills are too high, then you might want to put on the table solar and batteries and virtual power plant connections and tariff changes, load control, potentially financing to really decapitalize the solution, or even explore a network upgrade, because that could potentially lead to more returns for the solar and battery solution and therefore lower bills overall. So these are like a whole range of different potential solutions that can solve for that particular problem. But if you're just going to go and send out that 100 kilowatt quote, you're never going to get to all these other opportunities, and you're leaving lots of value on the table, both for yourselves and for your end customer, by not exploring these. And what we can show you today is that it's really fast and easy to explore a whole range of different solutions within the platform, and not sort of zero in too quickly on the one sort of result or the one thing that you're trying to sell. So here's a really good example of how adding different solutions together can have like a dramatic change on the value of creation for a particular customer. So I've got this example here of a brewery. So imagine a brewery, it's using 180 megawatt hours of energy per annum, and there's an opportunity to go and install solar at this particular brewery. So say that customer comes to you and says, yeah, let's install solar on this site. And if you just go out with that 100 kilowatt solar solution, actually, if you run the economics of this particular project, and this is sort of a semi-real world project, we're actually going to get a negative net present value, meaning that we're actually losing money by installing solar. And then if we go and have a look at a battery solution, we can slightly improve the net present value of this solution. But it's not until we also consider a tariff change. So where we've now gone and by installing the solar and installing the battery and actually lowering the consumption of the site below the large customer threshold and moving them into small customer tariffs, meaning that they're no longer paying for a demand charge on this site. They're able to just have a small business tariff, that we actually see like a dramatic change in the value creation for this particular site. And we're moving from like negative 140 $200,000 of net present value to a positive $260,000 of net present value. And it's only because you've added these different pieces of the puzzle together that you can do this. If you did any one of these things in isolation, you wouldn't achieve this particular result. So this is an example of where it's the combination of different solutions that ultimately lead to a multiplier effect of the between the different parts of the puzzle, and create much bigger, much more interesting projects that otherwise would not be present for customers if you weren't thinking sort of broadly around a problem. Now, this is going to be the real focus of session 4. So session 4 is about pumping up project value, and within that session, we're going to try and work through some of these different playbooks and show you in the tool how you can work through opportunities like this. So the next part of this is like, okay, you've got to run a whole bunch of different potential permutations of solution, and you might get several hundred different results that you're trying to figure out what's the optimal result for that particular customer. And so here it's where you need to be very clear on what the customer problem is. What is the key metric that is going to drive a solution to that problem? And also, what are the financial constraints of that customer that's going to limit a particular outcome? So we might want to try and reduce bills by a certain amount. We might have a budget that the customer is trying to fit for. There might be a maximum roof space that we've got to work within, or space within a car park where we've got limitation of the amount of batteries we can install, or the customer may have some other financial metric like a payback period or some kind of hurdle rate that they're trying to solve for. And so what we're doing here is we're going to show you how you can shimmy in on the right result really, really fast using the results explorer that we have within the tool. And so when we're thinking about these different problems, the key metric of which you're trying to actually solve for these problems will change, right? So if the problem you're solving for is my power bills are too high, the key metric you're actually looking to try and optimize is annual earnings, where annual earnings is the sum of the savings, the bill savings that you might be creating, but also the revenue that you might be generating from the system. So LGCs in the case of solar, or if it's participating in a BPP, earnings from participating in wholesale markets. This might be very different from, say, someone wanting to, reduce the unpredictability of their power bills, where it's actually less about the earnings and more about the energy independence, right? So what we're actually trying to do here is increase the amount of energy independence, and by increasing the energy independence, we're reducing the dependence on the grid. And so when you're presenting the results to a customer, you're actually going to change up your metric, and you're going to show them a different metric. You still could use the annual earnings, but like energy independence will be a far better metric to show. If you wanted to say, you're talking to a customer about an investment in solar and batteries, you might want to switch up to, say, IRR, or rate of return, where this is a metric where they can compare the investment in solar and battery versus other investments that they might have across their business. So it's not one size fits all here. It's very much choose the right key metric that you're presenting the results to a customer, but also help using these key metrics to interrogate the results and find the optimal solutions for that particular problem based on looking at those key metrics as the driver that you're looking at here. So like putting this all together. So imagine a customer comes to you and says, right, I want 100 kilowatts of solar. You're like, great, we can do that, but why? What is it? What's the reason that's driving you to get this solar? So we're going to explore the problem. We're going to go through that process of discovery. Through that process of discovery, we might interrogate that. Actually, the problem here is that the customer wants to reduce their power bills, and they're just searching for whatever they can do to reduce their power bills, and they're focused in on solar. And so we've decided that the aim of what we're trying to do here is to reduce their power bills. And then we're going to test a whole bunch of potential combinations of solar and battery and virtual power plant and tariff changes and other changes that might solve that particular solution for that site. And then we're going to zero in on the optimal solution for that solving that particular problem by using the financial constraints that the customer's provided as as qualifiers for what is going to be a good solution to then generate that winning sales proposal. And so this is the process that we want to step through today to kind of show you like how we get from that initial input from a customer through to that final step. Now we've built out a playbook. We'll send this out for you to use. It runs through the process of setting up a site, setting up a scenario, and then different ways that you can solve for these individual problems. We've built this in a platform called Scribe. It just has really nice step-by-step walkthroughs of like how you do different things. And within the scenario setup, we've included everything from, you know, setting up solar, setting up your batteries, you know, including virtual power plant revenues, doing tariff changes. Everything's in there so that any of the different solutions that you're trying to design for are all within this guide, making it really, really easy to kind of like go from that initial discovery through to finding the optimal solution. So we'll send that out as part of the follow-up email that comes for this course today. Okay, so we're gonna swap now to doing the demo. What I've actually done, so just stepping forward a little bit here, is at the end of this deck, so when we send out this deck for you today, so you've got this as like as a reference to refer back to, at the end of the deck is like an appendix of homework. And so if you've gone and got like you know, you've had some really great discovery calls with customers in the last few days, and you're wanting to now move to the step of designing solutions to those customers, just go for that. That's definitely the optimal outcome here is to actually be working on real world solutions. If you don't have a customer right now and you still want to like move into this design process and really sort of test and hone your skills in this design process, what we've got here is 5 different pretend sites. So what we've done is we've created sites which we've kind of gone through and created a little summary of like, here's the customer problem that we're trying to solve for. Here's some of the limitations that we might be trying to work for. And here's the tariff. And we'll also send out some load profiles for you to use as part of these homeworks as well. So you can take any one of these projects and have a bit of a play with the software and think about like what's the optimal solution that we can solve for. If anyone's really super keen, I'd love someone in the next session to potentially present one of their results and talk through like how they got to their answer. So what we're going to do today is work through this first one here, which is the cold storage facility in South Australia. For this particular project, it's in Edinburgh. It's a lovely big shed. Customer doesn't really know. They know who their supplier is. Of course, everyone has SAPN as the distributor, but they're not really sure like what their connection limit is. So we're gonna have to work with that and explore what potential solutions are. They have had a quote in the past to spend 100K to improve the to support a 250 kilowatt export. The driver for the customer here is that they're really trying to reduce their bills. They're trying to find ways that they're going to reduce their ongoing costs, and they've got a budget of up to $2 million to spend, and they're hopefully going to ideally find projects where the rate of return for the project is greater than 15%. We've identified that there's a bit over an acre of available roof space that we can work with here. So it's 5,000 square meters, which works out to being a maximum potential size for a solar array of about 1 megawatt. So we can use this as the sort of the starting point. So what I'm going to do now is like swap to the software, and I need to swap to the right one here. So I'm going to swap to the software, and we're going to start off by setting up this project. So when you're starting a fresh trial of the software, this is this is how it'll look. You'll get a bunch of example projects which you can go and explore. Ultimately, if you haven't seen the software before, ultimately what we're working to do here before we sort of jump in and create this project is we're aiming to set up a site where a site has a baseline, that baseline being a load profile and some tariffs. And then we're going to set up a scenario where a scenario can have different sizes of solar, different sizes of battery, and a site adjustment like this. And we're working towards trying to get a whole bunch of different solutions for that particular site, and then identify the optimal solution for this particular site. The final analysis that we're going to be able to prepare, which is really the first asset that you can provide to a customer, is these feasibility reports where you can fully brand these and create your own theme for them. So I've just got the default Orkestra theme, but you can create your own theme for these. And within these reports are all the information that you'll need to be able to sell a particular solution, from things like the cash flow charts to where's the energy going to how does the load profile change. And we go down to pretty enormous levels of detail where you can really drill into what's going on the site, both from an energy perspective, but also from a financial perspective, and being able to like drill down into the earnings breakdowns and even down to the bill level, where we're creating a bill before and a bill after and savings. So this allows for like very rich conversations with a customer, of which in the next session we'll go into like how to use these dashboards and how to speak to the value that's created in these by your projects. But I wanted to just quickly show like where this is going, what we're aiming to try and produce as the sort of first tangible output for a customer, and therefore have those conversations and really start to build the trust with customers around like what is sort of the best and optimum solution for a particular project. What we also find is that customers that get really comfortable with the software actually get to the point where they're actually happy to build projects live with a customer sitting in front of a laptop like we are today. So treat that as kind of like the kind of potential like holy grail, where you can get so quick with using the software and identifying solutions for a customer that you can actually do it in a real world case. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to create a new project. The name of this project is super cool. Now you can either create a new client or just use an existing client that you've got. I'm just going to use the Orkestra client name here. And then we're going to start off by creating a new site. The name of the site is Super Cool Edinburgh. This project is in Edinburgh, South Australia. South Australia, there it is there. And then the customer didn't really have an understanding of like what their connection was for this particular site. I know that the maximum demand for this site is about 650 kilowatts. So let's take a punt that this site has a dedicated connection and that it's got a megawatt transformer sitting somewhere in the corner of the site. And so that will be the import capacity for the site. And then we also know that the customer was going to have to pay to get some export. So conservatively, we might just actually say that there's no export on that site, and that the customer is going to our customer is actually going to have to invest if they want to be able to export. So if you want to be conservative, start with really conservative import and export limits. And these import and export limits are really critical. So for exports, super important when you're modeling solar. If you've got unconstrained exports and high feed-in tariffs, it can really blow out the maximum sizes and be very unrealistic. And vice versa, if you don't have an import limit, you can have a battery that's trying to charge during a time of maximum demand when it's not actually possible for it to do so, because there's a physical constraint to the network. So really worth having a crack at like what are realistic import and export limits for the site. And you can always come back and adjust these things later. This is the good thing about this software is nothing is fixed. you can set up a site and run the first analysis. And if you need to, you can always return back and make the adjustments later. The next step is to upload the interval data to the site. I've already gone through and uploaded this data, so I'll save myself the trouble of having to upload it. We'll send out these load profiles for you to do it. And you can say, here's our maximum demand on this site. This is, you know, pretty typical of what you would expect of some sort of like logistics site where there's a cooling facility, like strong base load on the site. And so, you know, got a very, very high load factor for this particular site, which is, you know, probably what you would expect. And then what we need to do now is set up the tariffs. So within, if we just go back to our deck here, I've got the rates for this tariff here. I also know that this is this tariff. I've already found this tariff, but you can search for this tariff within the library by sort of going and identifying, like, we're in South Australia, this is an SAPN tariff, and we're going to match up the prices with the prices that we have on this here, and then be able to use that to then, you know, put in the code. So if we go back to our project here, we're going to go to our SAPN tariffs, and we're going to look for the large business monthly peak demand tariff, LBMD, and that's our we'll add the network tariff first. And what we probably want, the reason why we add the network tariff first is that when we're doing this, we want to go in and take a note of what's the time of use windows. So for this particular project, we've got a time of use window that starts at 7 a.m. and ends at 9 p.m. on weekdays. And that's going to be really critical when we're entering our retail tariff, because most retail tariffs will line up with the network tariffs on site. Not always the case, but it's a generally safe rule of thumb to use. Now, in this case, we want to, every time you've got a commercial industrial customer, you're going to have to set up the tariff from scratch. So we're just going to enter our generic retailer tariff here. We've got the tariff here. So we've got a 18-cent peak import rate and a 12-cent off-peak rate, a 4-cent export rate, a bunch of usage charges, a metering charge that we have to add, and then we'll need to add the loss factors in a second as well. So we'll just quickly set this up. So we're going to have a time of use, which was 18 and 12. From looking at our network charge, we know the timings for this. So that's now set up our import. For the export, it's an anytime tariff with a 4-cent. We then need to add our fixed charge, which was a metering charge, which was $2.70 per day. And then we've got a bunch of usage charges here. So, 0.7 cents for the SRES, 1.2 cents for the LRET, and 1 cent for the RES. So we'll just 0.7 cents for that. LRET was 1.2, and our RES was 1 cent. And so that's all of our usage charges that we want to add. We're now going to save that tariff. And then what we're aiming to have here is a bill created for us for this particular site. And so here's our baseline. All right, this is essentially the total bill for this site for the last year. And we're going to use this as our baseline. Oh, there's one more thing we need to adjust here is we wanted to put in our the MLF and DLF. So, oops. So the DLF is 1.07 and the MLF is 1002. So MLF is 107, 1.002. And this can have sometimes a pretty big impact. So you actually just increase the bill by $40,000 by adding those MLF and DLF factors in. So we've now added those in. So that's done. So we've created our site. So for most projects, what you'll find is that that's like 60% of the work is setting that up. And you know, a lot of it is in translating the tariff into the site. That's where it's really like, it really requires a human to do that. We've tried all sorts of methods internally here at Orkestra to try and automate that. We've not been satisfied with any of them. So that's really where the majority of the work is going to be setting up this tariff. If you don't have load data on day one, and you wanting to produce some initial results, you can always go and find one of the load profiles within the library of load profiles we have as well, and use that, rescale them, and at least get something that you can start producing results for. Ultimately, what you can do with our software is like create some initial results for a customer and go, hey, we've done some preliminary analysis on your site. These are pretty exciting you know, opportunities here. Do you want us to explore this more? And then that might be the thing that actually drives the customer to go and do some additional work. I actually heard a live, you know, story from a customer the other day where they did exactly that, where they were having real trouble getting any data out of the customer. The customer finally just gave them one build that they could start with. They went and did some analysis, and within 24 hours, they had all the interval data they needed to actually go and do the analysis properly. So it's very powerful to be able to use the software and as a means of like creating conversation pieces or creating incentive for customers to go and do further work. All right, so with now finding the right solution, what we want to do is go and create a scenario. And what we recommend you do is you build up the scenario progressively. So you might just start off with like a commercial solar array where you do the solar first, and then you might duplicate this and do solar plus battery, and then you might do solar plus battery plus the tariff change, and you're progressively working through and making sure that you're understanding each change you're making to the project. But what you'll see is that once you start building, it's very fast just to keep on adding additional things into the mix. So we're going to start off by creating the solar. When you're doing this, you set up the solar profile first. You have an option of either using the weather estimate, which pulls the generation profile from PV watts, which is what we're going to do today. Or if you want to get a bit more precise and you want to like sit down and with helioscope or PV-Assist, you can design a system, take the generation profile from that, upload it into our software, and then use that as the input into the project. So we're going to just use the weather estimate here today. And then the next step is then to add a whole bunch of systems. So rather than adding one system here, let's not get specific on what is going to be the right size for this particular site. Let's just test a whole bunch of them. And the way that we recommend you do this is you start with a maximum size, which is the maximum size that either the site can take. So in this case, we've determined that this site could take up to a megawatt. So that would be the megawatt, the size that we put as the maximum. If there was more space at this site, so say they want to put, you know, additional solar on the car park, for example, the maximum size that we would generally recommend you go for is about double the maximum demand. So in this case, the maximum demand was 630 kilowatts. So let's, you know, your starting point might be say 1200 or 1300 as the maximum, and then the minimum a tenth of that, and then an increment, a size increment where you're going to get it at least 10 different sizes. Now, this is your first pass, right? So this is not intended to be like that you're going to sell them exactly 100 kilowatts. You might actually do several runs after this. This is about trying to get some initial results out really fast, get to where we think that the optimal solution is going to be, and then start doing more fine-grained analysis around that particular zone in later runs of the software, and then zeroing in continually on like what is optimal. And then also, like, once you get to the later stages, when you start doing the technical design, working back and like putting in exact prices and things like that. So then we want to put in like some upfront costs. Let's go for say $1,300 kilowatt hour for these sites. 1% for capex for ongoing costs. Apply our generation profile, add all our systems, and then we've got a whole bunch of systems added. Now, if we wanted to like test say, a north-facing system versus east-west racking, you could just add another profile and then a whole bunch of additional systems in here. We also want to tick on our incentives as well. So in this case, we're actually going to turn on STCs and LGCs, and we're going to be a bit cheeky and claim both. So this is where you would install the first 100 kilowatts, then come back a couple of weeks later once you've gone through the processing of your STCs and install the second half of the system. So let's add all the systems now. We just want to then confirm the start date, the analysis length, and the discount rate. I'm just going to move this to next year. I'm going to hit run, and then off we go. So now we're getting our first results out of the system. What's going on here is we're taking all these different solutions. We're giving each one of these to its own AWS cloud computing array and modeling all of these different solutions in parallel, and then bringing them down on the other side to be able to present all the results into a single chart. So there we go. We've just finished our solar run. And what we can see here is that we can definitely like max out this side. So the solution with the maximum net present value is the largest system on site, which is great. That's not always the case. It might be that it's a much lower system size, but we also can see here that we've only spent 1.3 million so far on this system. So like, let's go bigger. Like, let's go for a much larger size because there's plenty of scope to do so. So, not a larger size, more solutions. So like, let's now look at like what happens if we add batteries to this particular solution as well. So let's go in here and add a battery to this particular project. Now, there's two different ways to do this. You can either add the name brand solutions of where we've got a whole bunch of different solutions, say Evo Power batteries that we might want to look at here. I don't mind that approach. My preference, though, is just to start off with a generic battery that has pretty sort of typical technical specifications and no sizes attached, and then work back to like finding a battery that's kind of close to a match to that particular size. The next step is to add a control profile. You can either use one of the existing ones that's been set up in the software already in the library, or create your own one. It's very important here that you take a moment to really understand what is the control solution that you're going to be providing to a customer, and is it capable of doing what we're modeling here? So if you're just taking a residential battery out of the box and you're going out there and saying that it's going to be able to participate in wholesale markets and contingency FCAS, you're going to be misleading your customer because that's going to require a whole bunch of additional steps to go through to enable that. But you can quite easily model that type of battery using a rule-based type control system here. Then an alternate, once you do actually understand like what is the type of control system you're going to be able to use, then the system is very powerful to be able to model different things. So here we want to do peak demand reduction and tariff arbitrage, and let's just like wind out the arbitrage to 100 megawatts. So that's a 10-cent difference between the discharge and charge rates. And this is just demand reduction plus TOU. So I'm going to save that. And then again, same sort of process. We're going to add a bunch of systems here. And what we want to be able to do is put in a range of different systems again. So I would usually go for a maximum rating somewhere around the maximum demand for the site, and a minimum rating at sort of a 1/10 of that or thereabouts, and then increments in a reasonable increment here. We're going to go for 1-hour batteries here. 1-hour batteries tend to be better for commercial industrial projects where a lot of the function is around power functions. And then let's call it, say, $900 kilowatt hour for install costs, 2% capex for our opex, apply our control profile, add the systems, and then here's all 13 systems that we have. So now I've produced a whole bunch of different battery systems that we want to try. And so now we're going to rerun this solution again. And we're going to see what happens when we add the batteries into the mix of this solution. What I'm going to do while we're waiting for that to do is actually duplicate this scenario. And I'm going to rename this battery plus network upgrade. I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to do the final step, which is to add this network upgrade. So from this, from the information we had from the customer, they said that we could get 250 kilowatt export for $100,000 upfront costs. So let's add that into here. We may now need to reduce. So we've got too many solutions here. So what we might actually do in the second is once we've seen what the optimal battery size is, we might actually ditch a few of our results or ditch a few of the solutions and like narrow it down so we can get under the solution limit. So I'll just wait for this to finish. It's nearly finished here. But already we can see pretty significant amount of value that's going to be created by adding a battery. Okay, so there we've got our battery out. And what we want to do here is, so the driver for this particular customer was they want to reduce their power bills. And so what we actually want to do here is rank by the key metric that is going to judge what is the optimal solution for that particular customer. So we're actually going to rank these in terms of the annual earnings and rank them highest to lowest in terms of annual earnings. And then we're able to find the solution that is going to be less than the $2 million that we want to spend, and we wanted to find a solution that is greater than 15% IRR. And actually, the top solution is actually the best outcome here. But customer might say to you, "Oh, I need to pay back less than 4 years," and then in which case you might want to like keep on going down until you find a solution which is less than a 4-year payback. Once you've found that solution, we might want to save it, and then we can then go and have a look at like what is then the where does that fit in, say, the net present value, or in terms of like internal rate of return. Are there other opportunities that you might want to have a conversation with the customer around where there's different types of value that you might be able to create for them by ranking these things in terms of solar size or in terms of battery size, where they can kind of get a sense of like what's the optimal solution here. And what we can see is we may even want to go for like an even bigger battery. That like we've got a pretty amazing tariff here. There's lots of value around, and so we might even be able to go even bigger than this this maximum size. So we might actually just go and add some additional sizes for our final run to then find it. But you can see here the process is really set up your site, run a whole bunch of scenarios, get some initial feedback from the solution, from the results here, start to get a sense of like what's driving the economics, and then zero in on the right solution by ranking by a key metric that is going to be the key metric that you're going to measure the success of that solution by, and using this like the table of results to find solutions that are like optimal here. So let's do this final run now before we finish up. So we'll go in here and we'll actually delete out some of the smaller battery solutions here. So we'll go and delete a bunch of the smaller ones. And then we're going to add some additional solutions here. We're going to go for 700 to 800 in increments 50. Put the same costs in here. Put our control profile in. Add the systems. Update. And then we've got the change that we want to make as well. And so now we're going to rerun this analysis and get the final run out of this process.
And you've just seen there in a very short period of time, you've been able to test, well, one, set up, and two, test a huge range of different solutions. And like you said, the holy grail, James, is being able to almost get to a point where you can do this sitting down with the customer. Maybe you've got the baseline set up and the scenarios set up, but you can do the runs potentially with the customer face to face.
Exactly. Yeah. Nearly done here. It takes about 60 seconds to run solar and batteries together. Final results, just getting the last few results out of this. Nearly done. The other thing is probably worth mentioning is, like, once you've zeroed in on what is kind of like looking like to be the right sort of solution for this particular site, is you want to like delete out a bunch of different results and then run at least once in precision mode. So quick run mode will run the first year of analysis and then extrapolate out on that first year. But it doesn't, it really proxies out things like degradation, solar and batteries. And what you want to do is run things in precision mode. So we can see here now that we've got, just re-rank all these results again by annual earnings. And we can see now, if we're like trying to fit within this $2 million budget, we can actually increase the system size up even further. So now we've gone up an additional size to a 700 kilowatt hour battery and a 1 megawatt solution here. So we've got a $2 million upfront cost where we've completely maximized the annual earnings here. So we've gone from like $300,000 savings up to nearly $500,000 worth of savings. And we could still go even further. We could add BPP revenues into this. We could look at tariff changes. Like, there's lots more that we could do to go even further in extracting more value for this project as well. So that's the process of like going from that initial starting point of where a customer might come in and just go like, I want a particular solar system size. We've gone from that through to creating a much bigger, more rounded solution that is likely to be a much better outcome for you guys as solar installers, and because of much bigger capex outlays, but also potentially produce much better solutions for actually solving the customer's problems here. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Next steps is for you guys to sort of take over from here. Take what you've learned today, use the playbooks, and start doing some homework. So if you've got an existing project from those discovery calls that you had after the last session, start getting into them and modeling Orkestra projects in the way that we've shown you here today. Otherwise, if you don't have projects ready to go, use one of the homework examples that we've got at the end of this deck. Maybe you want to use the same project that I ran through today and try and get your own results for that as well. If you've got any questions at all, Tyler and Jake are available for anyone who's not a customer already. Otherwise, we've got Georgie and Tim Johnson available for any existing customers. If you don't have access already, after this session, please go and start a new trial. So just hop onto the website, start a new trial, get a trial happening, and start doing some modeling. If you've a previous trial user, our preference is that we just re-enable one of your the trial that you've already had, And we're happy to give you, for the attendees of this course, happy to give you an extra 14 days to have a muck around and model some of these projects within your one of these trial accounts. So just send in a message into the support email there, and we'll make sure we get your account re-enabled. Just make sure that you send the email, send from the email that you use to start that account, and ideally you've logged in and just find the team ID for the account as well. The team ID you'll find when you go to the home page, you can see there's a team ID up here, and just if you can send us that, that's even better. That's it from me. Over back to you, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks for that, James. So yeah, next session, we're going to spend a lot more time on communicating value to C&I customers. So this is really about how do we talk to the decision makers? I mean, how many of you out there have put a proposal in front of a business manager, but it doesn't get past the CFO? So it's really about understanding what is of value to these decision makers and how to portray that, how to get that across. So please join next week with Georgie, our head of customer success, and James will be back again. So that's pretty much it for today. Before we jump in, we've got a little bit of time left for some Q&A, but I just want to say that after this, there's going to be a survey. Please spend a little bit of time filling that out. And then we're also going to be sending through a lot of material from this session. So we've got the slide deck with all the slides that we've just been through. There's going to be the playbook and the homework tasks that you can access. So it's all set up there for you. And hopefully you've really enjoyed this session, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Also, there's going to be recordings. So we've got a little bit of time here to go through some questions that you've sent through. Yeah. Thank you. Please send through more questions. We're happy to answer. And if we can't get through all of them today, we'll follow up with them after this session as well.
Yeah. So the first question is, what's the x-axis for this figure? Sent through at 18 minutes past 11. I'm not sure what I was presenting at that particular moment. Was it this slide? It might have been this slide. This is a all the results ranked highest to lowest in terms of net present value. I think you saw in the software here, if we go into our back into our project that we were just running through before, within this you can present results by a key metric. So you can choose to sort of rank them highest to lowest in any of the key metrics here, and then you can kind of like click through the results and like try and identify optimal solutions that way. That's one way of doing it. Another way is you can change the x-axis and rank by solar size or battery size or some other metric in here. You can also, for this particular example that we've got here, where we've added the adjustment to the site and increase the export limit for a cost here, we can actually put colors in and put the baseline versus adjusted. This is really helpful for understanding, how the results might change with those sorts of investments. So, yeah, there's multiple ways that you can skin the cat with these charts here.
Excellent. Here's another question. So, what is the method of forecasting PV and market in future years in the platform to enable it to estimate financial metrics accurately, James?
Yeah, so we don't do any generation forecasting in our platform. We rely upon generation forecasts that are produced by PV Watts, which is what we showed you today, which is produced by NREL in the US. You can also create your own generation profiles out of Helioscope and PVSys and directly upload the outputs of those software into our software. So there's a few different ways that you can do it. The other thing that we didn't really cover off as part of this is that you can, if you've got cost forecasts that you're needing to you're needing to sort of manage within the software. You can have different escalators for your tariffs, for your O&M costs, for your CPI. You can change, the future years of the calculation, and make changes to the prior years, etc. So these are all things that you can kind of like do as part of your project here as well. Another thing that is useful is like if you're doing anything around carbon reductions, looking at changing the grid emissions predictions, things like that. So there's different ways that you can kind of deal with modeling, creating accurate forecasts into the future.
Excellent. Another one here, I think I can answer, but how's the price of PV and battery determined? So this is something that you will have to do yourself. You'll have to work out the cost of fully installing your solar systems or your installed cost of battery to be able to determine those numbers to put into Orkestra. What we put in today was just an example for that.
Yeah, I think I would also add to that, which is in the feasibility first method, don't be too precise with the costings up front, right? Like it's about trying to do initial runs with sort of rules of thumb of like, what is a typical dollars per kilowatt peak for solar, or dollars per kilowatt hour for battery installed, and using those kind of like generic figures. Be conservative if you want to, and just getting some initial results, because ultimately what the objective here is about trying to get to a point where you can start having conversations with a customer about value that you're creating in the by the solution you're deploying, and kind of leaving the detailed costings and the sort of detailed technical design after you've got the customer on the value, because there's no point doing any of that work of like trying to get down into the weeds of the solution unless the customer is actually genuinely interested. If they're not interested, then move on to the next customer. The whole point here is about trying to get to that conversation about value as quickly as possible. Once you've nailed that down, do the additional work, then come back to the platform, rerun your analysis once you've got the exact costs determined and the exact design mapped out in a proper design software. This is a different step that we're doing here, which is really about trying to get to that value as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Another good one from Paul. So can Orkestra suggest different tariff changes, or is this something we have to manually check with the DNSP?
Yeah, it's something you're going to have to manually check. Yeah, it's really like, I suppose it's really key if you're kind of like advancing and you're trying to step up and improve your use of the tool. One of the things that you're going to have to probably do is start getting familiar with the types of tariffs that might be available for you. I think what we'll ultimately work towards, and it's something that's already like the kind of like data and the infrastructure is kind of existing within the app, is that we will start making tariff recommendations in the future. It's something that we've talked about a lot internally. It's just something we haven't quite got to yet. Obviously, our software has a very large surface area in terms of the types of features that we can build out. And so, it's something that, we will get to eventually for sure. It's a good idea. But yeah, today it is a bit of a manual process where you do have to kind of be aware of the tariffs that are available for you. And then you can compare, go in and compare the different tariffs by adding the network tariffs into the mix.
Nice. I'm starting to see a fair few questions come through, specifically around the battery side and the VPP side. So, are we going to take a deep dive into the battery analysis, and are we going to demo some more specifically the VPP revenues?
Yeah, so we're planning to do that in the final session, in the pumping up your project revenues session, and going into that. Within the playbook, I have, if you want to sort of jump ahead and have a look at VPP revenues and setting them up within the software, I've created a section here on adding VPP revenue, where here it sort of talks about what you need to do to add those revenue streams. Basically the process that's involved in setting up these different things, and then you can take those take these steps to then go and apply the VPP revenues into the projects. What I do make note of up the front here is information around how to think about these different controls as well, and think about the different types of revenue that's available to you. The difference, if you are doing VPP revenue streams, what you need to do in terms of thinking about metering and stuff like that is all part of this this playbook.
Excellent. And just conscious of time, so we've got another good one here as well. Thanks, Naeem. So can I add different escalators on current tariff and adjust tariff and compare tariff?
Today you can't. So you'd have to do that in multiple runs today. So you would have to, if you wanted to have one tariff with a certain escalator and then put in a different tariff with an escalator, you'd have to do that as two scenarios. What you can then do is turn on multiple scenarios into the chart here. So rather than just looking at the results for a single scenario, you can select multiple scenarios and then do things like color the results by the different scenarios that are in here. That's one way of kind of being able to identify solutions and drill into the look at different escalators and compare them all on the same chart.
Yeah, nice one. And we'll just finish off with this one from David. So does Orkestra rely on PV watts for the losses or the loss factor?
Yes, it does, except for the DC to AC ratio. So we allow you to adjust that within the setup. So you will have seen that when I was going in here and adding systems, I put my own DC to AC ratio in here. When you're in setting up these like your weather estimate from PV watts, you can choose the system losses and choose the inverter efficiency as well. So whilst we are relying upon the losses, we are giving it the expected losses as inputs from the software. So well, to the API, sorry.
Excellent. And just actually lastly from Jim, always like your feedback, Jim. So have we considered providing response surfaces with battery size and PV size for the axes?
I'm not quite sure what that means.
It's all right, Jim.
Sorry, Jim.
We'll get some more information.
Maybe send us an email of what you mean by response services. One of the things that we are doing, and maybe this is part of this, is and Chris alluded to this in the last session, we are building out a panel mapping feature in the software, a feasibility first panel mapping feature, meaning that you can define areas that you want to apply solar, and then the system will design multiple different system sizes using the available area that is available to it, but also in different configurations as well. So if you want to do that comparison of north versus east, west versus some other configuration, you'll be able to do that. One of the things that we're also trying to do is look at the reflectivity of the particular surface as well, and incorporate that into the production analysis when we're looking at bifacial panels. So that may be what you mean by that, but yeah, something to perhaps just email us about.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple more questions in here we'll probably get to. We're sort of out of time at the moment, but thank you all for joining today. Thanks, James. It was a great demo and a great walkthrough of the platform. Please look forward to next week. We've got session 3, so communicating value with C&I customers. And please fill out the survey. We love to hear feedback and hope you've all enjoyed. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks, everyone. Catch you later.